Welcome to Tech Challenge Makers Conquer E-Commerce. I'm Elise, your resident tech expert and author of the book Browser versus Buyer. I've worked with e-commerce shop owners for over 6 years, and I've helped hundreds of creatives overcome their technology fears. Gain clarity and direction in your business with Elise's E-Commerce Elevator 6-month group coaching program. Join now at MyScheduledBiz.com/elevator. The link is in the show notes. All right, hello Bizers. Today we are going to be talking with Andrew George from Mr. Andrew George. He helps makers build, promote, and scale their businesses through organic, evergreen promotion strategies. He has a successful personalized embroidery business, a coaching business, and is co-founder of BizFit Formula. In this episode, Andrew and I will be talking about seeing yourself for who you are and seeing your business for what it is. All too often we get caught up in what we don't have or what we think we should be, and forget to double down on the amazing place we are and the amazing places we're going. Andrew and I have played in the same circles for a while, but just recently I read 2 things he wrote about his journey with e-commerce that made me realize that he had something important to share with you. So here we are. Andrew, I'm so glad to have you here to share your expertise with us. Please tell us a little bit about your business and your experience with e-com.
Yeah, I'm really excited to be here, and definitely that running the same circles and having a chance to actually speak is really exciting as well. So I kind of got started back in 2017. I was fresh out of university, excited to apply for jobs, got all these big high-powered jobs. That was kind of the big, I know, the plan while you're there is always like, oh, you're going to work for some big company and have this high-powered job. And I was like, okay, applying for these jobs, and my inbox is flooded with rejections. I was like, oh. And the thing that kept coming up was you don't have enough experience. And I was like, well, how am I ever going to get experience if you won't give me a job? So I was kind of stuck in this kind of vicious cycle thing. So not being one to kind of put around in the sand, I was like, well, I'll make my own experience. And definitely being at a business school for all those years, and then kind of seeing ads and stuff for like the maker side of things, I was like, okay, I'll go and make my own stuff. And that was kind of how I got into that. And that grew over time and got successful. I was getting all these orders and stuff. And actually, I'd always had this passion for kind of teaching people things and helping people. And even at uni, I'd applied for this teaching thing, which, again, I was rejected from. But I knew it was that, okay, well, I'll go and do it myself. And that's kind of how I started the coaching business. And that's kind of really exciting. And definitely over time, I really refined it. And I kind of, even just recently, kind of shifted exactly how it was going to work. And I'm really excited to go forward with that. And then third business, because
Two isn't enough,
is with Melissa Pickle and Regine Roberts, who I kind of knew from different groups. And then we kind of worked together on something. And being at this event, we're kind of talking, and we're all planning on doing this kind of end-of-year event workshop stuff. And we said, well, we should team up and make this super workshop. And then it was like, well, if we're doing this 3-day event, what does everyone do at an event? They sell something. So we kind of sold this coaching program and accidentally started a business, as you do. Now we have all these really great coaching clients that we love working with and who are having their own successes. And we kind of, we have this third business that's doing really well. So that's kind of how I started all 3 businesses, the short version, because I know went into the full story of all 3 would be here for hours.
Right, yes, exactly. That's how I feel. I got asked to do this for something I was on recently, and I'm very techie and whatever. I made a timeline, and I was like, I can't even fit everything on this timeline. And for me to say everything on this timeline would take forever. But I think, you said some really awesome things there, which is why I wanted to have you come on. And that is, you kind of fell into stuff. And I think a lot of times people do, they fall into the next thing. And you wouldn't have had the ability to do the coaching and stuff if you hadn't done e-com. Clearly you have experience in e-com with your own business. You also have experience in e-com through the coaching. So I know the Bizers are in good hands here while we're talking about kind of your history and your past. So yeah, I'm super excited to have you here. Okay, so let's jump into the questions. So those of you who have been with me for any amount of time here on Tech Challenge Makers Conquer E-Commerce, you know that I kind of have a set of questions that I normally ask. And we're still sort of doing those, but Andrew and I are going down a slightly different path today, a little more in touch with yourself instead of just straight by the book like we normally are. So Andrew, thank you for jumping into this slight difference in the way that we're doing our podcast today. All right,
That's me all
so
over is the doing things differently. I had like when I was at school, there's this teacher is like, I always like coming to you first, Andrew, to see how you did it because I know it's going to be different from the way everyone else in the class did it. I'm like, I don't know if that's a compliment or not, but that's kind of been everything forever. It's always like, well, there's the way it's done and there's the way I do it. So
always the
doing this
exception,
differently
right?
is not, yeah. So doing this differently is not a huge surprise to me.
Okay, so let's jump into our first question. So, Andrew, how does knowing yourself, including your limitations, and knowing your audience impact sales for all small business owners, including makers?
Yeah, so going back to starting off in 2017, it was in starting that business, it was initially my cousin had had a baby and I'd made her these little thank you cards. So people giving her gifts. It was like, thank you for giving Murray this present. And I kind of designed that and printed them at home. And I thought, well, that's a thing people do. I could do that and kind of came out with the business name EB personalized. And that's probably the only thing that stuck. So I kind of had this personalized in mind. And I kind of, as I was trying to develop that a bit, I realized that graphic design skills are really not professional selling level. And then being in all these shops, looking at all these printers and stuff, I was also like, I have no idea about printing professionally and making these look good. And I was like, I know my dad was a paper maker for years, and I was like, oh, he'll know. And then it was like, no help either. So I'm like, you know what?
So
Maybe I'll
basically,
change this a little
you
bit.
realize that limitation, and what did you do with it? At that point, what do you do? What do you do when you go, nope, I can't do this thing I was planning on doing?
So I heard about crickets, and like the cut machine things, and I bought one of those, and I thought I'll do that. But kind of, I don't know, the whole vinyl thing and it being like stickers that people could peel off. I was kind of like, that feels really professional to me, and I kind of wasn't super comfortable with that. I did actually release, I was in Christmas 2017, this collection of stuff with it, and I was like, this is so awful. I sold one thing, and I'm like, if I could find that person and give them their money back, I would. It was not good. But it was, I sent me this thing. I think usually an advert on Facebook or something. I was like, look at this machine. It's an embroidery machine. And I was like, ooh, that fits into the whole personalizing stuff thing. This looks great. But I saw the price and was like, no way. Eventually it was on eBay. I found this super bottom of the barrel, like cheapest embroidery machine in the entire country. It was like, it was cheaper than the shops. It was the cheapest one on eBay. I was like, okay, here we go. I'll start with this. And like limitations wise, I was like, I don't know how to use this. I had this big mess of thread everywhere. I was using the wrong stuff. And it took me months, and eventually I kind of mastered that. But yeah, it was and for a couple of years even, I still had that machine, and it was slow, it was basic, it was this awkward size hoop that you put all the fabric in that none of the designs anyone sells were that size because it was just this random size that no one else uses. And yeah, I suppose it really was super limiting. But for me, I had the machine I wanted and I was using it. And not getting caught up in that limitation and just working with it. And it was like, okay, well, I can't do these things, but I can do all these a million other things. And if I keep doing this, the money's coming in, I can afford the better version of this, or I can get the big multi-needle machine. And even now I don't have the big multi-needle machine. I just have the like top of the line singling machine with a decent sized hoop, if you know what about the embroidery rod. Yeah, I'm working within those limitations, and definitely when I teach people stuff, I was recording a lesson this morning for people in style embroidery businesses, and I was like, think of the limitations of what you've got and just see all the millions of products you can still make with that, and definitely not letting the limitations stop you or be a block. I never done that. With anything, it's always like, okay, I can't afford this, so I get the cheaper version, or I just work with what I have until I can afford it. And it's definitely the last thing I went to given this is even though you have some sort of limitations, not letting them stop you and get in the way of getting what you want.
Yeah, 100%. That's the goal right there. Even though you have the limitations, don't let those stop you and keep you from getting what you want. And I think that is really huge, especially for makers and e-commerce people that, you don't know how to build a website. You don't know how to do anything. And you have to figure it out anyways and not let it stop you. And I think that's 100%. And of course, that impacts your sales, because if you don't learn how to overcome those limitations, you never make any money, because you either don't start a shop or you start a shop that sucks. So like, if you had decided to keep trying to do the vinyl, which you clearly were not like made for, it probably wouldn't have done very well, right?
Yeah, we kind of spoke a bit before about the failing forward. It was kind of like working with those limitations and having to fail along the way and learn. We're kind of like, that's so much more beneficial to someone, is that learning process. Instead of coming in with, okay, I have the $10,000 machine plus $25,000 coaching plus an assistant and plus this and that. And it's like, okay, those people can only work within these kind of confines they've been given. It's like the coach is given this particular thing and they know how to work this machine, and they can only run their business if they have an assistant who's actually doing all the work. And they aren't, if anything changes to that, their business fails. But the kind of working your way up as you go and doing things in order and failing and learning that no matter what happens, you have a plan and you can kind of go back a level if you need to, you can move forward. And just kind of failing and learning along the way. It's like failure is kind of what you want in a sense, because you're going to learn 10 times as much stuff than if you had succeeded the first time. And I really preach that.
Yeah, and I think just to be clear, I teach my Bizers all the time that you have to go through the levels, right? So that's the terminology that I always use. You have to go through the levels. You start here, you go. There's nothing wrong with having someone do your social media or someone do stuff. There's nothing wrong with hiring people to help you. But there is a huge advantage to learning how to do those things first, so that you at least know what it is and you can actually have some kind of valuable information about what's going on, so that you can run your own business. Like Andrew said, sometimes in business you go forwards and you take steps, what people would think of as moving forwards, but then you may have to take a step backwards. And if you don't know how to run that thing you're giving to someone else, how are you ever going to manage it, right? So we're not saying you can't have people helping you with your business at all. That's not the point here. But knowing, how to do this stuff and having to struggle through that builds your ability to stay. There's a huge percentage of businesses that fail in the first 5 years. And one of the things that makes sure that you're not going to be one of them is to buckle down, deal with your limitations, and figure out the hundreds of products, like Andrew said, that you can still make or you can still sell in spite of those limitations. And that's going to impact your sales, not only now, but in the future. Because guess what? If you have to shut your shop down, you're never going to make any sales. Okay, so let's go into tech, which we've already kind of hit on tech a lot, but since this is Tech Challenge Makers Conquer E-commerce, it's kind of important that I bring tech into every episode. So what I wanted to talk about today, Andrew, is how technology can make us blind to what's happening around us and therefore keep us from seeing what we need to do next.
Yeah, I think, and I kind of spoke this to you before as well, about the technology kind of making us blind a little bit and not really being able to appreciate numbers, especially like when we spoke about hiring people. As long as you kind of can measure things and define success, it's kind of like if you hire someone to run your social media, but you have no idea on goals or what you want from your social media, you don't know anything about it. You never know if they're the best social media manager in the world or if they're really wasting your money. Yeah. So knowing that and looking at buying those numbers, but being blinded by kind of the social media world and thinking that everything is on this massive scale. I was just a few weeks ago running my summit, and I had a total of I think it was actually exactly 300 people, which in the overall summit world, a lot of people call a flop. But I'm like, that's 300 people. If I was in a room hosting something and 300 people turned up, I'd be like completely overwhelmed. I'm like, oh, There's all these people who are here for me. Ooh. And even on your social media and seeing, okay, I posted a picture of me and I got 10 likes and 3 comments. That post is done horribly. It's like, no, if you were walking down the street and 10 people and stopped you and commented, you just said, ooh, I like your hat or whatever. On like 3 people made like longer comments and kind of spoke to you for a while, you'd be like, oh, this is really good. I look really good. I feel really good. And it's they're still real people. And they're still making comments. And it's that you interact with them and see them and realize that they're people who are there and support you as well. And that's really, I think that's the kind of barrier social media puts between us, is that it's everyone expects to have these huge, massive scale audience and things, and doesn't realize the actual people there. And it's easy to forget that there's real people behind just a social media profile.
Yeah, 100% agree with you. I think also sometimes the tech stops us from remembering why we're doing it at all. So we get so caught up in the things that we can't do, we forget the people that we're doing it for. Because I think most, especially makers, they do this because they want to make money, but also because they actually want to help someone with something. And what you make has a lot to do with what you wanted to help them with. So like for you, you started doing this because you realized that like your sister needed to have these cards. And you're like, well, I can help other people have those cards. And yes, it morphed and changed from there. But ultimately, what I find is that most people start from a place of wanting to help people. And I think sometimes that tech stops us from seeing that too. Not only do we forget to see the audience when we get stuff up and we get stuff going, we also sometimes forget to see our audience when we're actually trying to do the work. And so taking a step back from that sometimes is actually the right move. Even though this podcast is all about tech, the tech shouldn't be a barrier to you seeing who your audience is. I think that's 100% it. That's completely true. Yeah. Anything else to say about that?
I guess touched on it before, but the measuring all your stats as well and really looking at everything. It's and using that to set goals. It's with the tech, it's okay. Maybe I can only afford the $10 plan, but the $100 plan looks great. Okay, well, I can use the $10 plan to make the 100 and eventually afford that. And setting goals and looking at your numbers as well. It's one thing I preach all the time, and what gets measured gets managed. So looking at your social media, looking at your emails, your click-through rate, your open rate, and looking at that and setting goals to improve. So many business owners don't measure anything and just kind of put things out there. So that's kind of the other thing. I think tech has given us, but it's so ignored. It's the email course I have. The bonuses are all about tracking, about using UTM tags and setting up Google Analytics. And I look at my stats. No one even opens those modules to look at them.
Yes.
They're like,
so actually, that's really interesting. So you kind of turned this on its head. So the question was, how does technology make us blind? But the truth is that sometimes we're blind to technology too. That's really what you're kind of saying. And I find that to be 100% true with my people is we forget to use the tech we have to see the people, right? So you don't realize how much these posts actually impacted someone because you didn't bother to look at the numbers to know, or how many people were interested in what you said in your email because you didn't bother to see what your open rate or your click-through rate was. And you're right, that also would keep you from seeing those people 100%. And that in particular definitely keeps you from seeing what to do next. Because if you don't know what did well, how do you know what to replicate? How do you know what to do again? You can keep using the same type of post over and over again that does nothing, but how is that ever going to benefit you or benefit more of your people? And that's, I think, again, the stats for sure. You know, if you have a post that is like the most engagement you've ever had on social media, clearly you should do something similar to that post again. If you have a post that literally is crickets and nobody responds at all, maybe that's not the best post for you to be using, right? And this is how you learn, and this is how you make a plan for what to do next. So yeah, 100%. All of that can prevent you from seeing why you're doing it. Yeah. Okay, so before we actually talked about analytics as being our one thing. So I'm really curious to see how you're going to switch this now. Let's see what our one thing is. Okay, so what is one thing that every listener should implement today when it comes to understanding their current business situation and making a plan to move forward with that knowledge.
To get kind of the questions around a little, but yeah, it is that whole analytics thing and having everything in place, because it's kind of I see a lot of people who don't even set this stuff up. It's like, even if you set up Google Analytics and you don't look at it for a year, and like, as long as it's collecting those numbers, at least that's a start. But yeah, when we do the BizFit boot camps with Melissa and Regine, one thing I always give people, and that they always ignore, is this email spreadsheet. And we look at subject lines, so we can see, because it's not just looking at the stats, it's looking why those stats are like that. So it's like, we look at open rate, and that's all dictated by subject lines. So we look at the subject line, put that in, and we can kind of compare subject lines and see which ones work. Then from that, we look at how many people click through, how many people land on the website, how many people check out the website, whatever it is. And so many people ignore that. So using that things and doing it, it's like every time you send an email, open this spreadsheet and use it. And so many people don't. But like, this is what we do. And also not just looking just at the stats, looking at why. When we do that bootcamp, we start off by looking at all our numbers, but I also make everyone look at, why are the numbers the way they are? Why is February higher than June? Not just, oh, February's higher than June. A lot of people stop at that spot. Or like, oh, this post is doing better than this one. And I'm like, no, why? Let's look at why.
I think from what I've seen with my clients, sometimes it's hard for people to make that connection. And it's something that I'm excellent at. Clearly, you guys do it in BizFit formula. So somebody, you presumably must be good at it as well. But I see with my clients all the time that they have really struggled with understanding the why. And it becomes this having to be done over and over again thing so that they can start to kind of understand those connections. So sometimes I think the reason that they don't do it is because they're not sure how. But ultimately asking yourself that question of why is it this way is exactly 100% what you need to be doing. So just like before when we ran through this, Andrew, you kind of gave them a lot of things and it was supposed to be one thing. So let's see if we can take it down just a tiny bit smaller. So I think now what we're saying is that you should look at your analytics today. If there was one thing that you should do today, it's to go look at your analytics. Don't you think? Isn't that what we're basically saying?
Yeah. Look at it, measure it. No, I'm going to say several things. I'll stop myself. It's like, set up, then look at it, keep measuring it, look at why. And I'm like, oh no, that's like 10 steps.
So one thing just for today is to go look at your analytics. If you don't have your analytics set up, you should probably get them set up though. That is very true. I really try to do one thing and I never do. So they're not walking away with anything different than what they normally get. So you're totally on par with this podcast. Okay. So anything else that you want to tell the visitors before you go, before we get to our very last question where you can give them your free thing?
Anything else before we go? Yeah, definitely going back to like the original point, the whole, it's just, they don't let what seems a limitation stop you. It doesn't need to be a barrier. It can be, I know, just kind of like a fact. It's kind of like, okay, I don't have this thing or whatever, so I'll do this. Kind of, it's just it
makes you alter your course.
Yeah, it's a fact of life, and it's not a positive or a negative. It's just a thing, and everything can be neutral. You don't have to be sure having this big fancy machine is an advantage, and maybe having a smaller machine is a disadvantage. But you have that. That's a fact. Don't let it get in your brain at all, and just, okay, I have this machine that can make this, so I'll make this, and then down the line, I can change.
So I absolutely love that. So we actually, my daughter and I just got back from our trip. We try and go every year. We didn't go last year because we were moving, but every year we go on a car trip and we camp. And there was this one particular thing that she really wanted to go to. And we realized that based upon our limitations that we either couldn't go to that one thing or we couldn't go to something else. And we had to decide which one we were going to do. We only had so much time. We had to get places on certain days to make things work. And so I was like, well, this is a fact. Like, there's no point in getting upset about it. You can either cry and it'll still be true, or you can just get over it and do something. So we cut something else out. We drove for 14 hours straight to make it to the thing that she really wanted to do so that we could do that thing. And I mean, it made us exhausted for the rest of the trip, but that was the reality. There was no point in getting upset about it. But I think all too often in our businesses, and Andrew, you're speaking right at me because I do get upset about things quite a lot. I think all too often something happens, whether that's getting a negative comment from a customer, or realizing you're not making the income that you want, or your machine isn't the right one, or you posted something wrong, or this happened to me very recently. I accidentally sent my entire year's worth of emails all at one time. Stuff happens. You can get upset about it, or you can take it as a fact, alter your course and go around it. And I think, yeah, that's 100% what we want you guys to walk away with today. So Andrew, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. If our listeners want to know more, they want to connect with you, I know you've got a free thing for them, but where would you like them to connect?
So the best places are on Instagram's probably our most active, just because there's post reels, stories, most opportunity to see me. And then my hit the snooze evergreen organic content for makers who like to sleep in. I think that's the proper name. Facebook group is kind of where I'm going to be most active as well from now on, kind of posting a lot of stuff in there on what I talk about is probably the best place as well.
And the free thing is the free Crafting Your Perfect Abandoned Cart Sequence playbook. And we will have that in the show notes, of course. So make sure you grab that. I downloaded it myself. So Andrew is kind of, I know you're kind of more now, but I know you used to be like the big expert on email. I know you're still doing that. So Andrew is definitely someone that's good to go to for email stuff, which is part of the reason this abandoned cart sequence, I'm presuming. Andrew, is that correct?
Yeah. Kind of what it was like before. It was kind of like business as a whole. Now I'm like super focused in on what I actually like. And that's the organic content, because I don't like paying for stuff, and evergreen because I don't like constantly creating content. So email fits perfectly into that. There's a lot of different sequences I teach about, but the abandoned cart one is a huge one, because because it, like the Facebook group is hit the snooze, it's like even if I'm in my bed, Flavio is out there sending that abandoned cart sequence and bringing in sales while asleep. So that's one of my favorite sequences, and that freebie kind of goes over 3 emails I recommend, what you need to include, kind of the layout I recommend for emails. And that'll also get you on my email list as well, and that'll let us keep in touch.
Awesome. Okay, well, thank you so much, Andrew, for joining us, for sharing that with the Bizers. I always love being able to give them free stuff that'll help them. And they all know that I am not as much of a teacher when it comes to email, so I'm sure that'll be very helpful for them. And I don't know, maybe we can try and talk again in the future at some point on the podcast. Bizers, again, it is Andrew George, Mr. Andrew George, basically anywhere you can find him. And I will talk to you guys in the next episode. If you like what we're doing here at Tech Challenge Makers Conquer E-commerce, and it's helping you gain clarity and direction in your business, you should check out Elise's e-commerce elevator. In this 6-month group coaching program, I'll guide you through the ins and outs of building a business for purchase conversion. You'll also get to join up with a small group of other e-commerce shop owners who are focused on building exponential growth and reaching the right audience. Head over to myscheduledbiz.com/elevator and join us. We welcome a limited number of new members every 6 months, and by signing up today, you'll reserve your spot. Thanks for listening. See you next week right here on Tech Challenge Makers Conquer E-commerce.